Well, good morning. This is the final podcast in the Devon and Cornwall Record Society series. We've got one extra that I had planned on. I was going to start the next series, but we're going to have a bit of a break. So this is a great one to have because it's a completely new book as of this week or this coming week. And we have Tony Gale with us. Now, I'm Todd Gray. I very seldom actually say who I am, but I am with the Devon and Cornwall Record Society. We are interested in documentation and the production of original sources. Hence, I'm interested in new books because all of our books are very research-based, including Crediton and the Great Fire of 1743. So I'm going to ask Tony if you could just tell us a little bit about the book.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Well, the book accompanies this year's exhibition at Crediton Museum, which focuses on the Great Fire of Crediton. The vision for the exhibition is something that from the very start we wanted to have an emphasis on legacy. Too many exhibitions just come and go, and there's nothing, no trace of them really, except for a few sort of imperfect memories of what they were about. So we decided we'd produce a book as part of the permanent record of what we were doing. And I'm so glad we did. In doing the research for the exhibition, we unearthed an awful lot of information, much more than we could possibly do justice to in the exhibition, but just right for a book. So we've called the book Great Crediton and the Great Fire of 1743, explaining that it's not just about the fire, it's a wider picture of Crediton in the 18th century. We've used the fire as the sort of the pivot and the focus, but we've included a lot of extra stories in there about local people, local properties, tracing some of them over a much longer period.
Well, for people who don't know, particularly people in Cornwall who know Crediton in the distance, they won't necessarily understand that Crediton was redefined by its fire in the same way as, well, Chudley and Tiverton. Mm-hmm. Not comfortable a bit of it. I mean, fire was a great problem for Crediton.
It surely was. I mean, this was the most destructive fire in the town, the most destructive of many. And just to give you some bare statistics on that, there were at least 14 and possibly as many as 18 people who died. Different sources say different things, and I guess that's about who died immediately, who died later, etc., etc. 2,000 people made homeless. Crediton was a sizable town for the 1740s. But yeah, 2,000 people made homeless, something in excess of 400 properties destroyed, which incidentally I think also tells you something about how tightly packed people were in the town centre at that time. So yeah, I mean, more than half of the town was destroyed in the space of a few hours.
And I think the visitor who, even just travels through Crediton on the way to somewhere else, you're very much aware of not a modern town, but much more modern than, say, an Ashburton or a Totnes or a Dartmouth.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, within the West Town, the sort of the shopping centre, if you like, of Crediton, there is literally nothing left from before 1743. Weirdly, in doing the research for this, we looked at a couple of properties, which if you look at, I'm going to be dissing Historic England here for a second. Historic England website, you go on there, and it says, this place may, if we explore it closely enough, this place may be an example of something which did survive that fire. I went around those places with Peter Child, who some people will know, Historic Buildings Officer, and we could find no clear evidence of stuff from before the fire. So there is this sort of complete wiping away of the older town in that part. I'll come on to talk to you in a minute about the most amazing thing, one of the most amazing things we had to work with, which is a map which shows you just what it looked like before the Great Fire in enormous detail. But now, as you rightly say, Crediton is largely a sort of late 18th, 19th century town centre.
Well, let's talk about the sources, because that map is tremendous, really.
Oh, it surely is, yeah. I mean, just first of all, I mean, just to talk about the contemporary accounts, because they're the things we knew about first. They're the things which they're kind of well known within credits, and people are aware of their existence. But of course, what happens is when you mine a topic, when you sort of go back and look at it again, you find out a lot more. Now, our Presbyterian minister, a man called Micaiah Tobert, he wrote and published what he called a short account of the fire. And that's the thing which gives us an overview of the town, the local economy. It gives us those statistics I just quoted to you a second ago about fatalities, number of properties destroyed, the homeless, etc. And the other thing that Tobert gives us is a timeline of the fire. He talks about it starting at 11 a.m. He talks about when the wind changed direction and just sort of spread the fire even further. And there's a lot of good factual detail in there. As a complete contrast to that, we had a piece published in the Gentleman's Magazine, a lovely source which I'm sure people will be familiar with for all sorts of topics. And the Gentleman's Magazine published a report which told the story of a man who fled from his burning house, only to find that he and his neighbours were, they used the phrase, surrounded by flames, and they were unable to escape from their short stretch of the street where they found themselves. The heat was just so intense that he was getting scorched, and he climbed into an empty barrel in the street to save himself. He lived to tell the tale, which is how come we have the account, but others did not. You know, some of his neighbours with him at the time died. And one of the other things we found, this was really unexpected, and something completely forgotten in Crediton, which is an epic poem. And it's a very long epic poem, which was published at the time, which one of my colleagues in the local history society came across a copy of this almost by chance in our archives. Is this of any interest, she said? Well, yes, it's very different from the other sources, and it's full of literary flourishes, as you might say, which maybe not to everybody's taste. But you know the way with these things, everything that's from that time and that place adds something to our understanding about what happened, how people saw it, how they thought about it, and responded to it. So, you know, yeah, and a couple of little details in there which really flesh out the basic story. But coming back to the thing which caps it all, which we've already just mentioned in passing, is that map. It is an astonishing coincidence that just a few months before the Great Fire, the Lord of the Manor had commissioned a map of the town. He owned the marketplace, a very large marketplace, and he made a lot of money from market tolls. He wanted a map which would record lots of extensions, encroachments they called them, porches, lean-tos, that sort of thing, which people had been building onto the fronts of their buildings. Those encroachments were upsetting the market traders. They would find they were having less room for their stalls and for their customers. And what was worse, these encroachments were being used on market days by small traders setting up under these lean-tos, taking their custom and not paying the tolls. So he said, right, you know, give me a map. I want a map which will tell me all the details. And he got something which was really unusual. The way it's been drawn, it depicts all the buildings down either side of the high street face on, as if you were looking at their frontages from directly across the road. The conclusion we've come to is that that must have been done so that you could actually see, he could actually see a depiction of the encroachments. They're very clearly defined on the map. No, I think the map maker actually went completely over the top in terms of the amount of detail he recorded. But that means we get to see really grand Georgian townhouses, lots of dateable design features, eaves, string courses, that kind of stuff. But they stand in amongst some very strikingly different old-fashioned Elizabethan style timbered buildings, and loads and loads and loads of cob and thatch buildings, the type you'll still see in Devon villages. And it's organic, it's a street which has just grown up over time, and people have put in new buildings as fashions change. But fascinating, I mean, wonderful view. And of course, what it means is we can see exactly what Crediton would have looked like if you'd walked up that high street in the early 1740s.
So in effect, it's a lost Crediton.
It is lost Crediton, exactly. Yeah, I mean, rather.
I don't think we've got a similar map for Tiverton. I don't think so.
I'm not aware of one. I mean, I know it's outside of our patch, but I look back at what had been recorded as the Great Fire of Blandford in Dorset, which is also well documented, and they have a very nice map. But of course, it's a typical bird's eye view map. It's a schematic. Whereas ours, I quite fancifully, I say anybody who's used to using Google Maps and Google Street View can get with 21st century technology what Crediton got for 1743. So you can look down on it and see how it's all laid out, and you can look at it and see what it actually looks like.
I mean, it's similar to a map I saw of Bideford just a few weeks ago, of the same date. And at one point I thought, oh, they're very similar, but I think it's the style.
Okay.
Time rather than at one point I thought, oh, is this the same man? But I don't think it is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll have a conversation offline about that one sometime, because I'd be interested to see that. I've not come across anything else of this era which does the same thing. The guy who produced the map was a man called William Chappell, which is something we've just been able to nail down through the research for this. He's recorded on things like Devon Maps and Map Makers, that lovely DCRS publication. When that was produced, it's recorded as unknown, the origins of it. But we've been able to nail down the map maker, who went on to do some work with the Courtneys at Powderham. So he was working as a kind of estate surveyor, estate agent for them, if you like. But I think this was his big commission to establish himself.
Yeah, because I found in Chappell's book that wonderful little drawing of Crediton, almost as not an add-on, but it's almost like an incidental drawing mixed in with lots of other incidental drawings.
Yeah, you did, and I mean, wonderfully when we started doing our project, John Hill, one of my colleagues working on it, said, "I remember Todd Gray sent me something years ago, saying this appears to be about Crediton. Is it of any use?" And what we discovered when we actually sort of lined it up with the map, it's a preparatory sketch of one little bit of the map, and it's absolutely full of these little scribbles about this is this color, this is this material, and lots and lots of sums written down there. Wonderful. I mean, you can actually see his workings. I can actually tell you how long his stride was as well, because his measurement is in steps. He says there is 26 steps from here to here, or this bit of wall is 25 steps long. It's that kind of thing.
So would you say that's the most surprising thing to come out of the research?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a very good question. We were overwhelmed with the amount of information that we did recover, but there are gems like that. And I mean, anybody who's interested in cartography, anybody who's interested in the development of map making, will be delighted to find that kind of stuff in there. But some of the stories we came back with were in many ways more surprising. One comes from the fact that there was a relief fund which was raised. Nothing unusual in that. They sort of sent around, if you like, a request to communities around the country, and of course all of that stuff was collected through the Royal Mail, and we discovered that there was a highway robbery in the early months of 1744 when the Exeter Mail was robbed on its way, carrying a whole load of stuff as donations for the Great Fire. And so we're in the heyday of the highwaymen, but who knew? Nobody was aware that there was a highway robbery associated with this. And of course, we've got stuff now like Old Bailey Online where you can actually read transcripts of trials. So we can actually tell you what happened next. And if you'll forgive me, I want people to buy the book, so you'll have to read the book what happened next about that one. But I was working on this book. It's not just me. We also had Ellie Babbage, who, as you know, is excellent at genealogy stuff. Peter Child, I mentioned before, has contributed some very useful stuff on historic buildings. And John Heel, who's a kind of walking encyclopedia of Crediton and its history. And all of us working together contributed a sort of kind of complementary skill set, if you like. So, yeah, I mean, bringing those stories together, bringing that level of detail together worked in all sorts of ways.
So the book comes out fairly soon. I know it's going to be at the Crediton bookshop, but also available at the exhibition.
Yep.
For people unable to make it to Crediton, what do they do? How do they do it?
Okay, so as you rightly say, it's available at the exhibition now. The exhibition's open on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and on Saturday morning of each week through to October. You can find out all the details of that, he says, holding up something which he's already prepared earlier, which is our website for the History Society. And you can find out how to contact us there, how you can get hold of the book from us if you can't get to Crediton. Our local bookshop is a local community bookshop here in Crediton called The Bookery. I'm taking a whole pile of books into them literally this afternoon. And if you want to do a Meet the Author thing, I'm going to do a Meet the Author thing with them Saturday of next week to actually promote the book.
So that's the 29th of April.
The 29th of April. Yeah. I'd also prepared earlier. Here is the book itself.
When does the exhibition close?
The exhibition closes in October. It's scheduled to close at the end of the October half term.
And you've got a wonderful drawing by Richard Parker on the cover.
Oh, yeah, Richard Parker. I mean, Richard, who some people will know as a historical illustrator, he was delighted to get this commission. He said the number of times that I'm doing some work about a statement building and I have to imagine everything that was around it. Here I've got a whole street and I can replicate that and just turn that into a 3D picture. How great is that? And it's lovely. And the number of people who are looking at that and finding all the little details.
Well, congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I hope it does very well. It deserves to do very well. And I think it'll be interesting for people to sort of reacquaint themselves with Crediton by seeing the map and looking at what they know and what they don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that may be the greatest gift that the book gives, is it reappraises in our imaginations what we think we know.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm particularly gratified to find that, well, yeah, it's just a pretty ordinary high street. Really, you will see it in a different way.
Right. Well, congratulations.
Thanks, Todd.